Hey, what's going on? This is your boy, Nick Walters, with the Life Recreated podcast, where we are helping people to see that they have the power at any point in their lives to recreate themselves. And so with this being episode number 1, I just wanted to take the time to introduce myself, to share a little bit of who I am, give a little bit of my story, and the reason why I've decided to start recording this podcast to help those that are out there. So I'm originally from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Grew up in that area. Now I reside in Norfolk, Virginia, beautiful state of Virginia, where Virginia is for lovers. I'm a husband, I'm a father, and I'm just enjoying life right now. And so been married for going on 8 years. Actually, this month will be my 8-year anniversary. I'm the father of 2 beautiful children. I have a 4-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son, and they've been a tremendous blessing in my life. And so I've had some interesting times in my life, had some interesting stories in my life, and that's what I kind of want to get into in this podcast episode, is just to share some of those experiences that I've had and kind of what brought me to this idea of life recreated. So when you think about life, I know there's one thing that I always have recognized is there's always these like transition points that we find ourselves in a lot of times. And there's these transitions that, you know, on the outset, sometimes they look good. And sometimes they don't look so good. Sometimes they're, you know, wrapped up in adversity or difficulty. But there was something that I realized, and I kind of just had an epiphany about, was that in the midst of like all of these transitions in life, there's always this opportunity that we find to really like recreate who we are as people. And whether it be in relationships, whether it be in, you know, our finances, whether it be in just, you know, who we are as an individual, there's a lot of times there's in these transitions, you know, this opportunity that we can recreate ourselves. And so one of the things that I had just realized this recently was that there have been a lot of transitions that I've had in my life where I was recreating myself, but the problem was that I was allowing other people to recreate who I was becoming, rather than me taking the responsibility and recreating myself the way that I wanted it to be done. And so, you know, this episode, I'm just going to talk about a couple of those experiences. And there was, when I was thinking about this, there was really 3 main experiences that really just kind of resonated, that were transition points in my life that I just wanted to share. And so, like I said, I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And, you know, it's Fort Lauderdale, man. It's, you know, 15, 20 minutes away from Miami. So there's this certain lifestyle, there's a certain, you know, just atmosphere that is around that area. And so, you know, at a young age, I got caught up with a lot of things that I probably shouldn't have been caught up in, you know, hanging out with a lot of the wrong folks and, you know, running the streets and thinking, you know, that we wanted to live this hard lifestyle when, you know, in all reality, that wasn't who I was. So, you know, growing up, went to high school, graduated high school, and I'm thinking, you know, I'm going to go to college down south in Florida. There's a lot of colleges, man, a lot of partying going on. And so went to college for about a year, realized that this was not the move for me because I just couldn't stay focused, didn't like school, wasn't challenging, and at the same time, you know, just partying too much and just trying to live this, you know, lifestyle. And so ended up deciding to join the military. And so back in 2003, I joined the United States Navy, and you know, thought that this was going to be a good move for me. And you know what, looking back on it in retrospect, it was actually the perfect move that I needed at that time, because it gave me the discipline that I needed. It gave me the mindset that I needed. But at the time, I didn't realize that this was like a recreation of my life. You know, I was going to go from being a civilian. I was going to go from being, you know, just a kid out of high school. And they were going to build me into this, you know, a sailor. They were going to build me into someone fit for military life. Now, what's interesting was that, you know, going into the military, obviously it recreated who I was. My mindset was completely different. You know, my discipline was completely different. You know, I'm waking up early in the morning, man, like, you know, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, when before I was used to waking up at 11, 12 o'clock in the afternoon. You know, I'm making my bed every day and feeling guilty if I didn't make my bed every day. You know, I'm exercising and working out and you know, just trying to discipline my body and discipline my mind. And what was so crazy about that was that was so left field from who I was as an individual that, it totally transformed my whole life. I remember when I actually first got out of boot camp and I went home and, you know, I'm staying there with my mom, my dad, and my brother. And, you know, my mom is watching me, you know, she's watching to see, what kind of person I had become. And so I remember her making a comment. She said to me, Nick, you're so different. Here you are getting up early in the morning, cleaning up after yourself. And she was so used to me just being, just a regular teenage kid, not really concerned about anything. And, it was just such a life-changing experience. But one of the things that I kind of got out of that was that, the military did do a lot of good, but one of the things that I always just kept in mind was the fact that, my life was being recreated, but the fact of the matter is that the military was controlling who I was becoming. The military was really in charge of my mindset, how I thought, where I needed to be at, how I needed to act. And so, for me, that was one of the real first major recreations that I experienced in my life. And so, but now that I think back on it, I really didn't have a lot of choice. I mean, I had the choice of joining the military, obviously, but once I was in the military, I realized that I really didn't have a lot of choice in who I really wanted to become. Yes, I had choice in deciding, how far I wanted to get in my career. I had choice in deciding, where I'd like to be stationed. I had all those choices, obviously, but really in the mindset of the individual that they were making me into, it was really up to them. It was really up to their choice. And that's where kind of, I realized that it's really up to what the military wanted me to become. So anyway, I'm in the military for that time. Like I said, I joined in probably about 2003. And so I had been in the military for a couple of years and, just enjoying that lifestyle. I was single. This is the first time that I'm actually out of the house. It's the first time I'm actually making decent, consistent money legally, not having to worry about where's this paycheck going to come from, where's this money going to come from. So, this is the first time that I actually, was able really to just sustain myself. And so with that sustainability came a lot of irresponsibility, I guess you would say. Because I always knew a check was coming. I always knew I had a place to sleep. And so, therefore, I felt like, all the money that I get, I'm going to blow it. I'm going to party. And so, during my time in the military, man, it was just kind of almost a downhill, consistent downhill struggle, man, where, I'm just partying a lot, man. I'm drinking a lot. And I'm really just doing what everybody else is kind of doing around me because I think that this is like the cool thing to do. I think that this is the way that, military life is actually supposed to be. And so, with that, I got to a point where I was maybe about 5 years in, and I just hit like this depressive wall, man. I mean, I'm telling you, it was like running into a brick wall where you realize like everything that you've been doing for like the last couple of years, all the so-called fun you thought that you've been having, you realize like it wasn't even really worth it, man. And so I found myself, man, in this really depressive state, man, and I'm drinking a lot. I'm actually doing drugs in the military. I mean, just completely, just irresponsible and really just jeopardizing my career. And what ended up happening one day, just to get kind of like the story of it, man, was one day I found myself, I was living in an apartment with 3 other guys, and everybody was out except for myself, man. And I remember, just downing like almost a whole bottle of liquor. I don't remember if it was gin or whatever it was, but I was just pretty much just wasted, man. And I'm sitting there, and it was kind of almost like life just hit me where I realized, man, that if I didn't make any changes, man, I wasn't going to be going anywhere. And so it got me to a point, man, where I was just really just down, depressed. I mean, probably one of the darkest moments I've ever had, in my life. So I'm sitting there, man, I'm drunk. I'm sitting on my porch outside, man, and, I'm just smoking a cigarette, and I'm just sad at life, man, just kind of down at life, not realizing, where I needed to go. So I decided, I was like, man, you know what, maybe I'll call somebody up. Maybe I'll just, I just need to talk to somebody to get my mind off it, man. And this is the first time this ever really happened to me. And I've heard it happen to other people before too, but it just shocked me when it first happened to me. But I tried to call like everybody in my phone that I knew, I'd be able to talk to, man. And it was like nobody answered. And that just drove the depression even further. And so, I remember going into my roommate's room in his closet, man. And he had a Ruger, and I remember grabbing this pistol, and I went back on the porch, and I said, you know what, man, since nobody wants to be there for me, then there's no reason for me to even be here on this earth anymore. And it was one of the few times, man, that I was seriously contemplating suicide and seriously contemplating taking my life. And I sat there for a minute just contemplating it. And to be honest with you, I don't even know what happened after that, but I woke up the next day, man. I must have blacked out or something, and I woke up the next day and I'm in my room and I'm in my bed, and and I just started thinking about that day, that night, and I was just like, man, something's really got to change, man. Something's got to change. And so here's another part where I was transitioning into another recreation of my life, and so I decided, you know what, maybe I need to just get out of Norfolk, Virginia. I'm thinking, maybe it's just my environment, maybe it's just the people that I'm hanging around with, but I just need to get out of here. And so I remember trying to do basically everything that I could to get out of Virginia. I tried, doing a crew swap, which a crew swap is basically you're trying to, change the ship that you're on and basically swap out with somebody on another ship. So I found a guy in San Diego, California. I said, man, I can go to San Diego. It'd be nice out there. Tried to do a crew swap 2 weeks before we're supposed to go and get this crew swap done. The Navy's like, nah, we can't let you go. There's an issue with your clearance. I'm like, oh man. So, I'm thinking, what am I supposed to do here? This is not going to work. I volunteered to go to Iraq. After that, I said, you know what? Maybe I'll just go to Iraq, man. Maybe over there it'd be better. And mind you, this is like 2006, 2007. So it's not, the best time to be going over there. But I was just so desperate that I was like, man, I got to get out of here. And so I decided to try and go to Iraq. Went through the whole training with this Army unit for about like 4 months, just in the middle of nowhere in this desert. And the day before we're supposed to go to Iraq, they send me back to the ship and say, hey, you're an alternate. You don't actually have to deploy with us. And so I find myself, man, and I'm back on the ship, back in Norfolk, back, where I started. And I realized, I was like, man, something's got to give, man. A few months after that, we ended up going on a deployment. And, on this deployment, man, I had a lot of time to just kind of reflect, just to kind of think about life, man. And actually it was on this deployment, man, that I decided to give my life to Christ, where, I became a Christian. And, nobody was around. Nobody was there. I did have, one individual on the ship, man, that really helped me out big time during that time. And just, sharing with me his experience, the things that he had, come to realize as a Christian. And so I felt like, man, deep down in my core, like this is what I needed. This is just what I was missing. And so give my life to Christ and things, man, just started looking up, man. The rest of that deployment was great, man. I was sober for a lot of it rather than, just being trashed and not remembering anything. And so, I'm there and just enjoying the rest of this deployment. I get back home and the first thing I do is just jump into the church life where this brother that I met on the ship, just jumped into the church life with him. And so this kind of was like my second moment of like recreating myself. This is like the second moment of the big like transition in my life, because I'm going from not even caring about where I'm going to end up when I die, not even caring about people, not even caring about life really, to joining this church. And I get into this church, man, and the experience was just initially so overwhelming. It was so just refreshing, because it was something that I really felt that I needed at that time. It was something that I really felt that this was going to be what would help me to become like who I needed to be. And so getting involved in the church, man, it was really fast paced. Really, there was like always something to do. The doors were always open. The opportunity was always there to volunteer, to get involved, to connect with other people. And I loved it, and it gave me a whole brand new life. And my life completely started to change, man. There was no more drinking, no more drugs, no more women, none of that. And all these things started to fade away, and I began to just really just commit myself to the church and really commit myself to God. And this was like completely night and day, man. I would see people, that I was on the ship with, or I'd see people that, I grew up with, and, they're completely looking at me and saying, man, you're like a completely different person. You're not even the same person. You're not even the same individual. Like, who are you? And it was that moment that I realized, what, this was a moment of just recreation of my life. This is a moment of me just becoming a different individual, a different person. And so it was good. The experience was just tremendous. It was just overwhelming. There was so many things to learn, so many things I learned about myself, so many things I learned that I needed help with, that I needed to unfold. And, it was one of those moments in life where you feel like, man, you know what, I could just be here in this moment just forever. Like, this is just where I could find myself being for the rest of my life. And so, during that time period, which was a good year almost 2 years, at that time period, things were just completely turning around. I mean, it was like a 180 that was happening in my life. And during that time, I met my wife, and me and her started a relationship, and that just completely changed my life. I never would have thought, looking back on it and looking back on the way I grew up and the things that I experienced, I never would have thought that I would find, a beautiful woman that I'd be able to share the rest of my life with. But here I am, and my whole life is getting completely changed. My whole life is completely being turned around, and all these good things are happening. And I'm having all these great experiences. We ended up getting married probably about 2 years after I had joined the church, and began to start a life together. Begin to just create something good. And it was maybe about a year and a half into our marriage where I realized, man, you know what? I want to become a pastor. I want to preach what I've been learning. I wanted to preach what God had been doing in my life, and what God had been just deposited in me, and what I've been able to experience. And so in 2012, me and my wife, we decided, we're going to go do this. We're going to become a pastor. So I became a pastor, started pastoring a church. And, it was a small congregation, about 20-25 people in Greensboro, North Carolina. We were down there, man, and we were just grinding it out, man, just loving people, and just enjoying the opportunity to give back, especially when you kind of realize how much had been given to you, And so we're down there for about 3 to 4 years roughly, and we built some great things down there, man. Had some great experiences with people, just learned a whole lot, and like I said, it was just another moment in life where I realized, man, like, how did I even get here? There was no way in a million years that I would have ever thought that I would be a pastor, shepherding people, guiding people, I guess you would say, to help them find their own spiritual life, to help them find their own way in life. There's no way I would have ever imagined being there, but here I was, at that moment in time. And so, those 4 years went by. They went by really quick. During that time period, we had our daughter. That was another game changer. Just being a man and actually having a daughter completely changes your whole mindset on, man, how you look at women, how you view women now, because this is your little girl now, and one day she's going to become a woman. And so I got the chance to experience that, and just enjoying that time that we had in North Carolina. And so around 2015, the church that I was a part of, the senior pastor asked me if I'd be able to come back and be an assistant at a bigger church. It was about anywhere between like 400 to 500 people at any given time. And so, I decided this would be a good move in life. This would be a good opportunity. So we decided to come back. And 2015, we came back to Norfolk, Virginia, and I was an assistant, full-time ministry. My whole livelihood is dependent on ministry and serving people. And, initially it was good, learning a lot. Just everything is fast-paced. Everything is nonstop, and you're giving a lot of your time. You're giving a lot of your effort, and you're giving just a lot of who you are. But, within about a year or so, I kind of realized that, something wasn't the way that it really should be. Something was, to me, it was like something was missing, man. And I don't really know how to explain it fully, but it was just a moment in life where it was just like, man, this is not where I need to be at. And so it was that point, and a lot of other different things that began to start happening. My relationship with the senior pastor, just the whole structure of church, just the whole structure of how things were run, and just being now an assistant, you see a lot of things on the back end that the normal person in the pews aren't really seeing or observing, and so when I started to see a lot of that, I started to say, well, you know what, this is not really what I want to be a part of, and it was then that it kind of hit me that, with this second really major transition in my life, I realized that, my life was completely being recreated. It was completely being, transformed. But then it just hit me that, a lot of the decisions and a lot of the choices that I made were because the church was really deciding what they wanted me to be. If you think about it, you're sitting every week, you're hearing these messages being preached, you're hearing, these different lessons being taught, And over time, if you're not really paying attention to it too much, over time those things become, programmed into your mind, and it was something that just really hit me like, wow, I'm living and doing what the church wants me to do, and I'm really just trying to check the boxes, because I know if I check the boxes of the church organization, then I know that, hey, one day I'm going to make it to heaven, or I know one day, God is going to bless me, or I know one day, everything is going to be all good, just because I'm really good at checking boxes, just because I'm really good at performing. And when I started to look around, man, not just even in our church, but just church in general, man, I really started to realize, like, there are a lot of people that are living their life based on this checklist. And the checklist, really, if you think about it, I mean, it's selfish, because, the only reason that a lot of us actually follow and go about performing the checklist is just so that we can stay right with God, So, I mean, it really, I feel like, even just for myself, it really had a lot less to do with me wanting to connect with God, and a lot more with me wanting to just stay right with God, and just be all good and make sure I get that blessing, you know what I mean? To make sure that I can, just make sure I can get to heaven. And so when I started contemplating that, man, and I started really thinking about that, I said, man, you know what, this is not the direction that we should be going, especially in church, especially in this, in a religious setting. This ain't the way it should be going. And so that really brought me to another major transition in my life. And it happened around 2017, where I actually decided to leave. I actually decided to leave the church and just resign from my position as a pastor. And, there was nothing going on inside of me that was wrong towards God. I mean, there was nothing going on inside of me that I felt was corrupting me, I guess you would say. But what I did realize was, it was almost kind of like a light bulb went off, where I was like, you know what, I'm living a life not based on like what I wanted to create. I'm living a life based on what somebody else wanted me to be, And so I decided I had to walk away from that. And that was a huge decision, man. I mean, think about it. At this point, man, I have a family at home. My wife is not working. She had stayed home for, actually the whole time we've been married, she had been home up until that point, which had been about 6 years. And, my only income that I actually had was the church. But something in the core of me was just like, no, I just can't be here anymore. And I'm willing to take that risk. And, I'm willing to figure out what I need to figure out, if it means that I get the opportunity to create this life the way that I want to create it in my own terms. And so, I mean, it took me a long time. I prayed a lot about it. I meditated a lot on it, marinated a lot on it, man. But I really felt like, what the decision was, it was time for me to move on. I got to the point where I was so tired of other people basically telling me that this is how my life is supposed to be. It's like when you think about it, man, so many of us, and, I fall in this category too. So many of us, we're living life based on other people's terms. We're living life based on our employer's terms. We're living life based on our parents and what their expectations of us are. We're living life based on our spouse's terms. We're living life based on so many other people's expectations that I realize that many times we're not even cognizant. We're not even aware of the fact that we have the choice to create this life the way that we want to create it. We have the choice for this thing to play out the way that we want it to play out, not because everybody else is saying this is the way it's supposed to play out. And so basically, long story short, man, I decided to resign, gave it up, turned in my resignation. It wasn't a pretty resignation at all. I mean, that was my whole, the church was my whole structure, it was my whole life. My ego was wrapped in it. My ego was wrapped in my title, and I'm not afraid to say that. I mean, that's just, it is what it is. And everything that I knew was wrapped around that church. My whole social structure, my friends, my support, all of it was wrapped around the church. And so imagine just like being in a place in your 30s where it's like you have to start completely over again. Everything basically was severed, and it was my choice. So I'm not saying, oh well, woe is me. It was my choice to sever all those connections. And so imagine just being in this place where you just sever all those connections. There's no more friends, no more no more getting together on the weekends, no more structure. There's none of that. None of that. And this is where me and my family, this is where we decided to pursue. This is where we decided to go. And so walked away from that church, from the lifestyle. And it was another transition in life. It was a huge transition in life. And it was scary, and it was uncertain. There was a lot of fear there. There was a lot of doubt. Like, man, should I have done this? Especially when it came to actually preaching, I felt like that was the only thing that I was really put on this earth to do. It was the one thing that I actually really felt like, man, when I was doing it, this is what I was put on this earth to do. And so to walk away from that, it felt like, man, I was walking away from my dream. I felt like I was walking away from my whole entire destiny. And I felt like, man, I would never get this opportunity. I'd never get this chance again. But one thing I realized was that when I sat down and I thought about it, I said, wait a second, hold on, man. I just can't allow somebody else to be in that much control of my life. I can't allow somebody else to be writing the script of my life when God is the one that has given me the pen and the pad and said, hey, look, you can create this the way that you want it to be created. And so that was the biggest lesson walking out of this transition. Even though it was scary, even though it was a dark time, man, one thing I realized is that I now have the choice. I have the power of having the choice to recreate my life. And that revelation came after I left. And actually just recently I just started therapy and seeing my counselor, and she made a statement. She said, man, just think about this. You have this amazing opportunity to start from the ground up and build this thing the way that you want to build it. And I thought to myself, wow, I've never really thought about that. And so that's what really spawned this idea of life recreated. Think about it. There's so many of us that are in moments of our life. There's so many of us that are in, just these moments of life that are so dark and so, unfulfilling. And if we would only realize, man, that it doesn't matter what circumstance you're in, you have the power and you have the choice to turn those things around the way that you want them to be turned around, the way that you see them playing out in your mind. You think about this, man, we're not incapable of changing our circumstances. If there's anything, that's one of the greatest gifts that God has given us is this ability, man, to just recreate our lives, this ability to change the circumstance. The ability that even though all these outside influences may look like they're the ones that are creating our circumstance, the reality of it is that we have the power to do that. And leaving the church, leaving my position of a pastor, really just showed me that we have the power to recreate this life, man, the way that we want to do it. And so that's what kind of really just spawned a lot of this idea of this podcast, man, is that I really want to just help people. Just if I could just give them a little glimpse, man, of the fact that you have the power to really just fashion this life the way that you want to fashion it is just such an amazing concept, man. And if we could just grasp that, man, that could turn around the whole world, man. It could turn around the whole world. It could definitely turn around one person's life. And so that's what I want to do in this podcast. I want to just be able to help people with my story, my circumstance. And, throughout the podcast, I'm going to be definitely sharing a lot of, my own personal experiences. I'm very transparent. I mean, I ain't got nothing to hide, man. Everything that I've experienced in my life up until this point, I know for a fact somebody else in this world has experienced just as well, and that they need, to hear that, hey, look, on the other side of that experience, man, there's hope. There's something good that can always come out of it. And so that's my aim to really achieve in this podcast. I'm going to be interviewing some folks. We're going to talk about so many different topics, man. I want to talk about marriage. Marriage is huge. This last transition completely changed, my marriage and how I view it. I want to talk about finances. One of the huge issues I feel like, just us as millennials that we really need people to help us on, and we really need somebody to step in and just help us to learn how to build wealth and to, create the lifestyle we want. We're going to talk about relationships with our kids. We're going to just talk about mindset a lot. I'm really big into mindset, personal development, and just going to really talk about a lot of those things. And my hopes is that, through this podcast, man, I could just reach one individual, who knows, maybe even more, that it could just benefit, man, and just give somebody the inspiration, the courage they need. And so just want to thank you for joining me for this first podcast. I'm going to leave you with a thought of the week, and this actually came out of just reflecting on my life experiences. And what I realized is that one of the greatest gifts that we have in life is that when we're handed the opportunity to basically recreate our life out of the difficult situations that we've been given. That's one of the greatest gifts that we have, is that we have the opportunity to recreate this life. And so stay tuned for the next podcast. We'll be coming out every week. And thanks for joining me this day.
Yeah.